Here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at these strategies, and I've got several listed here. And this is really kind of let's say a kind of a beginning starter course to kind of give you a synopsis of what people can do, what they are doing. Some of these you're doing already, but I want to show these so you can kind of compare and contrast various ways to grow things, okay? So we're going to look at traditional field culture. It's a way basically I learned, you know, to farm. Permanent raised beds, I've done a lot of work with that. Container, bag production, and then of course high tunnel hoop house. Now, there's no way that I can cover all these in detail, but again, we're just going to glance over them real quick. And then I've got a few things to say at the end for some more detailed courses on some of these things. All right, so here's the assumptions we're going to have. So we're kind of on the same page here. We're going to assume that we are discussing just vegetable production, because a lot of these obviously apply to fruit, flower production. Suitable water, so we can irrigate as much as we want, and we're not going to have to worry about quality problems. Suitable soil resource. In other words, we've got the right depth, the right texture. I mean, we've got good soil. We're not limited by the soil we're growing in. And that obviously is not the case for all of us, right? We do have issues with our soil, a lot of soils in Oklahoma. But in order to get through the system and show you what's possible, there's no limitations here. For now, that's a perfect world, right? Minimal slope, and if we plow something up, we're not going to have to worry about a heavy rain washing it to Lake Texoma. And then there's no management restrictions based on production philosophy. If I'm going to grow organic, I'm limited a little bit on what I can do, right? It's for herbicides, so forth and so forth, what I spray with. So we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to assume that if we need to do it, we're going to do it. I'm not going to worry about it. Is that real world? Probably not, but that's what we're going to make those assumptions. Okay, traditional field culture. When I began doing this commercially on a large scale, it was in school, back at OSU, back in the 70s. And at the time, this is the only equipment we had, the only way we knew how to grow things and do it was field culture, you know? I mean, we didn't have drip irrigation. We didn't have plastic mulch. We didn't have hoop houses, or at least the way we're using them now. So we had field culture. That's what we did. And so in this system, in this production system, you know, we sprayed. We sprayed weeds. If we had problems with bermudagrass, now Roundup was not exactly commonly used back then, but we sprayed weeds. We didn't have an issue with that to get rid of perennial weeds. We tried to control those the best we could because we knew that there'd be issues after. Try to, first things first, get rid of them initially, and we don't have to deal with as much of the issue later on. So that's what we would recommend today. Just, you know, if you're going to use this system, first things first, get your weeds under control. Now again, we don't have limitations with our soil. We don't have problems with water, but weeds, you know, you're going to have them, right? Now, some people are opposed to using herbicides. That's okay. So what are the alternatives? What some folks are using today in field culture, they're winter tilling. This works better up north where it's colder, but in a winter where it's dry and really cold, you turn up that bermudagrass in the winter and it freeze dries it, right? To some extent. Is it perfect? No, but it does help. Now you follow that in the spring or the late spring with a cover crop, something like sorghum Sudan. George Kepper at the Kerr Center, thank you. He was the one that's really been promoting this, and he had some really good results with it. Now, does it completely eradicate the Bermuda? No, but it provides enough shade on that it will help limit that amount where you have to fight it, okay? And so he would recommend these two. In the further north you go, the better off you're going to be. Obviously, in Minnesota, they don't grow Bermuda grass, but you get my point. Now, tarps. You know, it takes a year to get good control, but some people are doing this. Now, on the 100 acres, let's get real. But a half acre, it works. If you want to spend the time putting the tarps on, purchasing them, and leaving them there, taking that out of production for a summer, it will seriously do a number on the Bermuda grass. We have a grower in this part of the world that does this. Matter of fact, he was just getting some plastic off Mr. Leon a few hours ago. But Alan Seiler uses. He farms up here on the Washita River. He uses this technology a lot, this technique rather, to help control some of the bermudagrass on his place. Sometimes, if our field has been farmed and with the improper equipment, especially we're using a rototiller, but also with the turning plow, we get some compaction. We get a compaction layer built up there. And so we might have to rip it. So we need to check for our compacted layers. And if we have an issue, we need to rip that before we continue. It's a good chance, a good opportunity before we plant. If we can prepare ahead of time, go ahead and plow down a cover crop. Add some compost to it, depending on the size you have. The cover crop is a less expensive option, but for some of these small intensive growers, compost is great. And the nice thing about it is you can put it on and you get right with farming. You don't have to wait for a season for your cover crop, to be ready to plow it under. Of course, there's winter and summer cover crops. That's another issue, but another story, another topic. But yeah, and the nice thing about this organic matter, you can't get enough of it, seems like. Isn't that something? 1% increase in the soil organic content, equivalent to 20,000 gallons of water. That's the holding capacity that will increase by. That's almost an acre-inch of water. That's a lot of water, guys. It can make the difference, in making the crop, getting something out of it versus letting everything dry up. Okay, we got that cover crop growing. Sometimes, if it's like a winter cover crop, if it's wheat or rye, we can go in and we can strip till that, leave some of the material for windbreaks. This is at Perkins, at Dr. Brandenberger's research. So he's got the cabbage growing in here. Just take out a swath and plant in it. Works great for your cucurbits, your melons out west, common practice. You can do that. Now, the only thing you're going to have to treat, maybe put some herbicide right here. This is too thick to worry about it until later. We're just going to leave it there, let it go to grain, seed. It's easy to control if it's rye or wheat. We're going to apply any kind of lime or sulfur we need. Sulfur is pretty expensive compared to lime. Another option, if we need sulfur to acidify the soil, we can use some acid-forming fertilizer. We can inject that. But this is a good time to apply lime because we want to broadcast that. We want to control the pH of the whole area. As far as the pre-plant fertilizer application, the amount that you're going to put on is going to be based on your soil test and, of course, the amount of organic matter that you plow under or you apply as compost. So you want to have the soil tested. This is not the most efficient way, right? Broadcasting your fertilizer, especially the phosphorus, the potassium, we'd like to have it more close right in the plant zone, the root zone. Spreading it between the aisles, in the aisles and so forth is not the most efficient, beneficial use of your fertilizer. You can band it or inject it in the plant row if you know where you're going to be planting, especially if you're going to be transplanting some crops. That's a good thing to do. Phosphorus likes to be super concentrated. It's better, it's more available to the plants when it's in a band because phosphorus gets tied up so easily in the soil. So we like to do that so we can super concentrate it so it's more available in a soluble form. All right, then we're going to prepare that seed bed, right? We're going to cultivate it so we can use our planters properly. Some planters are so light, especially the smaller planters, if it's a small area, if you've got a lot of clods, they're just not going to work well. So we want to condition that soil, get it real smooth before we run our planter over it. So here's some of the planters for seeding. All types, push planters, we've got gang planters. There's so many options out there. But the idea is to use a good quality planter so you can singulate your seed, so you don't waste seed, and you got a good stand, you don't have to come back and do a lot of thinning, right? We've all been down that road. If you don't put your fertilizer, especially your phosphorus and potassium on pre-plant, next best thing, or similar to, it's really identical, you put it on when you plant. And you've got hoppers on a lot of these seeders, and that injects that fertilizer in a band right here, to the side or beneath the seed so that the roots will come in contact with that concentrated. Now let me just say this, you can overdo the fertilizer, right? You can put too much not so much phosphorus, but potassium has a higher salt index and nitrogen certainly. And so if you put too much in a band, you could injure the seedling. So there's a limit, and you just need to know how much. You can read the information on the fact sheets or come to us, and we can kind of tell you how much you could put down in a band. The rest of it you would want to just broadcast, so you don't super concentrate it to the point it causes salt injury. Speaking of salt injury, here's the nitrogen. We're going to top dress our fertilizer after the crops are up, different rates for different plants, different timing. So you got to know when to do that. But we want to put about a third to half of the nitrogen on prior to planting, get a good starter slug there, and then we're going to put the rest on after the plants come up throughout their maturation process so that we don't overdo it, right? Weed control, cultivation. Again, this is field culture, the old standard. If you can steal in the field, right? I mean, that's been the way we have done things for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? It's still an excellent way to do it. The issue with this type of tillage, weed control is sometimes, as you know, if it's too wet, we can't get in there, and then the weeds will absolutely take over. That's one of the downside if you just rely simply on cultivation. In Oklahoma, if you got a poorly drained soil, you get in trouble. There are herbicides. You've got pre-plant, post-plant for different types of crops, grasses, legumes, broadleafs rather. So you've got options for you. Some of them require specialized equipment, different type of sprayers. Some of them, like a boom sprayer, would be like a pre-plant. They're directed sprays after the plants are up, the crops are up, and so forth. So you really need to know what you're doing. The problem with the herbicide is, some herbicides is that there's a plant back restriction. You can't just put something down and then I've got to change my mind, then come back and plant something else. You could kill the crop. So you have to know what that plant back restriction is, how much time it required for that herbicide to dissipate, so you can plant something else. Think it through. Think it through. What are the possible scenarios, right? Some people are into this now. This is becoming more popular to use vegetation, vegetative matter, whether it be living or mulched or ground up as a weed control. Here you see the crimping. This is really becoming a really cool way of doing things with transplants. The only issue here is it cools the soil. If you try to plant too early into some of this, there's no sunlight to warm the soil, so you have a little delayed reaction there. It'd be great for melons, pumpkins and things. But typically what happens is on something like this, you're just going to take out a strip, plow out a strip, and leave the rest of it there to control weeds, keep the cool soil throughout the summer. Here's the mulching, right? Shredding the crop, same deal. George Kepper with the Kerr Center, he had a cool little technique developed where he would take his BCS tractor, he would mow the cover crop down, and he would take his little tractor with his rotary plow and make a bed, plant in the bed that was exposed to the sun, it was exposed soil. Then he would drag the organic matter that he had just cut before he made his bed back over the bed to mulch it. Pretty slick, pretty neat way to do it without any plastic mulch or anything. It was just old school, hardcore, using what nature gives you kind of production techniques. And then irrigation, combination, both of these are usable in this irrigation, in this field culture. Of course, early on, like I said, at the experiment station in Bixby, we didn't know what drip irrigation was. It was around in Israel and so forth. We just didn't use it. All we did was many hour haul this stuff around, right? So the problem with this, how do you cultivate that? It's tough, right? Well, you have to have good weed control with herbicide. So that's if you're good at that. That can work, but otherwise you're going to have to remove the drip tape. You have to move out of the field, but irrigation is important, right? I mean, obviously if you're going to get maximum yields. All right, let's move on to field plasticulture here. Again, I'm just just introducing you, giving an overview of these different techniques. More and more folks are doing this. Micah here was part of the Oklahoma Department of Ag, Food and Forestry program, plasticulture program. He really helped introduce this topic or promote that in Oklahoma. And it's still going and blowing, it has its use. So let's look at the pros and cons, right? Just like field culture, we're going to incorporate all this stuff, whether it be amendments, cover crops. We need to do all this stuff ahead of when we bed. We need to have all this stuff broken down before we use that bed, or it's just not going to work right. Okay, so follow the soil test recommendations, do all this ahead. First things first. And then we're going to make sure that we've got a good field, level, soil is well broken up, well prepared, because when we put that machine on there, we don't want clods. We want it to go seamlessly. We want to make a nice smooth bed. And we want that plastic to lay nice and tight on that bed with no clods sticking up where you've got air gaps underneath it. To get the best heating in the spring, it needs to be continuous contact with the soil with the plastic in order for it to work the best. All right, here's all the equipment that you're going to need, right? You're going to need the bedder, mulch layer combo bedder. That's what most people are using now. You'll have a drip irrigation dispenser on it. You don't have to have a water wheel transplanter. It sure saves the back if you're doing a large area, but some people own their own. You can borrow these from people, rent them. And then, of course, a mulch lifter saves a lot of time, but some people just, if it's small area, they just dig it out by hand. I think, Micah, you were just taking some plastic out of the field, right, the other day? Yeah, it takes a lot of time. And then, of course, the disposal issue, right? It's not all piece of cake, pie in the sky. The disposal, taking up the plastic and getting rid of it, it's an issue, environmental issue in some places. Fortunately, in some places, they have enough plastic that they actually recycle it, or they can actually, there's places that will take it, melt it down, and make little beads out of it, and put it in power plants to generate energy. Guys, it's gas. It's made out of natural gas. Plastic is polyethylene. Preplant fertilization, a little different than the field. There's more opportunities here, or more things that you need to think about before you put the plastic on. Of course, broadcasting is another option. Again, it's still not the most efficient way, spreading it all over creation. You can band it into the bed prior to putting the mulch on if you have a bedder and then another piece of equipment that is a mulch layer. You can do that if you know exactly where that bed's going, right? And then this is what a lot of folks do. They have a drop spreader, or they just have a bucket, and they go in front of the bedding machine in the right rate and just drop the fertilizer by hand or with that. So they're putting it where the bed is, not in between the beds. Again, concentrate the fertilizer. And then this little machine right here, this is one that has a fertilizer box on it. Now, this, you're putting it on the top. The machine is incorporated into the bed. This, it lays right in front of the bed, so it's doing the same thing, but this has got both the plastic and the bedder in one machine. This is prior to using the bedder or the mulch layer. All right? So you have options there, but the idea is to get that fertilizer in the bed where the roots are. And then you're going to definitely, right, you're going to need to hydrate that soil. Worst thing in the world, try to make a bed in dry soil. It is a nightmare. It won't work right. It'll take you ages to try to get that soil moist enough to where it will wick that irrigation water. All your drip system will just sit there and beat up your water and kind of go down. Plus, it won't make a nice bed. It just won't. There's your application equipment. You get combo bedder. Micah, you've got one of these, right? Well, it's an option if you don't have a piece of equipment, a tractor. It doesn't make as nice of a bed, as high as a bed as this does. You've got more horsepower here. And of course, you can lay it by hand. This is hardcore. You have to have some way to make a bed. And then the BCS. Again, that's not actually a true bed, but it does lay plastic. You've got white on black. This is preferred for summer. Some people use the colored mulch. Remember, blue and red are the photosynthetically active radiation, the reflected. Typically, we don't. I'm not going to say it doesn't work. It works better up north where you don't have as much light intensity. Here we have so much light in the south that white, black plastic mulches are fine. We got more problems with knowing how to fertilize and irrigate versus what color of plastic mulch to use. Seriously, we got to get up to speed there before we start fine-tuning and using these designer mulches. Okay, so we've got the woven plastic, right? This is the weed barrier. You can apply that with a machine, or what a lot of folks are doing now, they're just laying it over the whole field. Don't mess with any cultivation at all. Expensive, but if it's this plastic will last a long time. You know, it's a possibility. That's becoming more and more popular, especially for folks who don't want to mess with machinery. Of course, you're going to need to fertilize those transplants when you set them in with a little fertilizer starter solution, whether it be with machine or by hand. And then seeding through the plastic. Again, more people are doing this. We have more techniques now available, more equipment. We used to just have to punch a hole by hand and stick the seed in. But here's some of the equipment available. Jab planter for larger seed stick. We have one of these little poly planters. They're pretty cool. They knock a hole in the, punch a hole in the plastic, and then they eject the seed. And you can really get going pretty quick. Expensive, several $100s for these. But they're kind of cool if you're into actually planting a lot of it through plastic. Seeding, not transplant, seeding. Okay, then you're going to need to fertilize, right? As the plants grow, you can't add granular fertilizer through plastic. You got to put it through the drip system. And the main thing here is following a schedule. Again, getting people to understand that you should be applying fertilizer based on the growth curve and the requirements of the plant, not just, what feels good, in order to get the best use of the fertilizer. It's expensive, the soluble fertilizer. So follow a schedule. They're out there online. I can help you with that. Okay, crop covers are very important to get the most use out of this. The system, you've got these plants that are really cranking on this plastic mulch. The soil's warm, but they're more susceptible. They're more succulent to that late spring freezes. So use the crop covers. All right, real quick, permanent raised beds. What in the world are you talking about? You can't grow commercially with permanent. Yes, you can, guys. Look at what they're doing in the city. This stuff about just being for backyard gardens, nope. You can have permanent beds for commercial production. It's happening all over the world, and it has been doing so for decades, but it's becoming more popular for people who are really intense in their production techniques, like this picture right here. So you've got all these options: wood, rubber, recycled plastic, and rubber, what we've been doing at the Noble Institute. It's kind of cool. I just like to recycle stuff. Concrete, look at this. And then, of course, metal. Some of it's more appropriate in some locations, depending on what you have available, how much work you want to put into it, how much sweat equity, all this stuff. But the idea is you use it in places where you don't have soil, or good soil. You bring in some decent soil, quite a bit of it, topsoil, if it's available, and then you mix it with compost, and you've got your growing medium. Becoming more popular. A container is different than a bed. Container has a bottom. Doesn't drain as well. So you have to take that in consideration, right? But look at that. Big tubs. Leon, you thought you were the only one. Isn't it amazing what people are doing with container gardening? Commercial container production. Okay, the cheapest, easiest way, if you've got access to irrigation and the money for a drip system, these just little cheap grow bags, a few cents a piece. A lot of people are doing it. Now, most of the time this is done in a protective environment, like a hoop house or greenhouse, but I have seen in some places, especially down south in Florida, and where it doesn't freeze, a lot of this is done outside on a commercial scale, just containers outside. Now, you're going to have the smart pot option. Leon talked about that a little bit. They breathe. They're really good for production. So something to think about. And I'm not even going to get into what he's doing with the subsurface bottom watering. He can talk to you all about that. But that's another option to do commercially. If you want to spend the time preparing your containers, and if that's your thing, if there's a way, there's a way. I'm not against anything that will work for you, and you understand the commitment it takes and money and time, go for it, whatever works. All right, then you're going to have, obviously, a different kind of growing mix. So many components you can use in a custom mix, but you don't want garden soil, right? You got to have something that drains. Composted bark is one ingredient I really like because it's coarse, and it makes sure you get plenty of drainage, aeration. Compost, Leon makes some. We've got a great product, Berger BM7. It's a commercial product. Leon sells it. Okay, and then, of course, the high tunnels. This is the last thing. Of course, I could talk for hours on this, right? But here's the deal. This is kind of bringing all this kind of together here with this. You've got a greenhouse structure, right? Different widths. Most of them are going to be 14 to 30 foot wide for a commercial structure. They're going to be up to 96 foot, but they're longer. Leon makes some that are 120, 130 foot. You can buy plastic that long now. Used to, 96 foot was all a person wanted to mess with for a 100-foot piece of film. 6 mil film is still the most popular. It's a 4-year product, 1 layer, solar heated, obviously. There's no natural gas in there, no electrical. You can do that, but again, a hoop house is just what it is. It's a passive structure, manually vented, permanent or movable, and then anywhere from $1 to $5. Now, if you put $1, guys, into it, it's a pretty cheap structure this day and time. But you have to revise these costs all the time. They just keep going up. Cost of metal, cost of everything goes up. Okay, for the benefits, extended growing season is what most people use them for. Weather-related risk management, wow, right? That's important in Oklahoma. Enhanced yield potential because we reduce the stress. We get the quality. There's not as much wind scarring on the plants, especially our fruit. Novel cropping opportunities. You go visit this guy over here. He's got kumquats and figs, thank you, growing. Now that's novel, right? We don't typically grow those in Oklahoma, but hoop house allows us to do that. And that's not a vegetable, but you get my point. You can do a lot of crazy things you didn't think were possible with these protected structures. You can maintain your planting schedule. Golly, that's important if you're growing for market, right? You got to keep the produce coming on schedule. Reduce pest pressure, more favorable work environment for the plants and for people. And then marketing advantage, because you simply can get it early and you can get it continuously, your produce to market, if you're if you're a good grower. If you're a good grower, you use raised beds, containers, you use some of the floating covers and things else that are the other types of technologies that you can incorporate into the hoop house. You can basically extend the season by 60 days or longer. It's like moving your whole operation 400 miles to the south. In Ardmore, it'd be like going to the north part of Houston. If we controlled that, if we just managed that really good, it'd be like growing down there in the garden outside. That's what's amazing about it. Some of the crops we're growing, right? There's so many things you can. These are most popular. All these are either my pictures or people right here in Oklahoma, guys, that are growing. And you can grow with the tractor form beds. You can grow in containers. There you go, on bags. This is Steve Hill. He's got permanent beds. So the sky's the limit. Do anything you can even use hydroponic system, aquaponic systems. We're not going to talk about that, but that's possible. Some people are doing those kind of things. All right, and then the coolest thing, I'll end with this. The synergy that you get when you start layering these technologies, the row covers, the plastic mulch inside that house, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, seriously, you can take each one of these things and like plastic mulch, grow some tomatoes outside. Okay, they do good, but if you combine them with the row covers in a hoop house, it's just that much more, okay? And so that's just exciting what you can do with very passive systems. And it continues to work. People keep putting these up. It's here to stay.